Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Alisa Slodzinska, and I work for the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, BACP. Welcome to the BACP Business Education Workshop Webinar Series. We have adapted our regular business education workshops at City Hall into these webinars until further notice. On behalf of our Commissioner, Rosa Escarino, I want to inform you that business licenses can be processed online where applicable by visiting chicagobusinessdirect.org. And just note that any websites or emails I mention will be posted in the chat box. If you are part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. If you want to learn about the program, please visit chicago.gov/business-education. To help guide your business and employees during Chicago's reopening process, please visit chicago.gov/reopening. Also, BACP and the City of Chicago's Office of Emergency Management and Communications created ShyBiz emergency alerts. You can opt in to receive targeted emergency alerts for the business community. If you are interested, please visit chicago.gov/ShyBizAlerts. Once again, all those emails and websites will be posted in the chat box. And we encourage attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box and send your questions to all panelists. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And today's webinar will be Fighting Fraud, presented by the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. And with us today, we have Marianne with BACP. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Alisa. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone that has joined us today. I'm really happy that you all are here. So as Lisa said, my name is Marianne Reger. I am an associate staff attorney with BACP. I am a prosecutor for consumer fraud. I've been with the city for 4.5 years, and for that entire time, I have been on the consumer fraud team prosecuting these types of complaints. It's really given me a firsthand look at the kind of complaints that come in and how deals go bad. So I developed this webinar to share with you everything that I've learned so far about what the red flags are and how to avoid falling into those traps and being a victim of consumer fraud. So let's go ahead and get started. Before I get into consumer fraud, I did want to take a step back and just talk about the department in general and all of the things that we do. We license and regulate businesses. We have these outreach events where we try to help consumers and businesses grow. We also have small business consultants that can help you determine what kinds of licenses you need and answer general inquiries to help support your business. I should have included on here that we also house the Office of Labor Standards. So if you have a question about the city's minimum wage ordinance, paid sick leave, or fair work week, we have information about that available on our website. And then lastly, we get to what I do within the department, which is to enforce the Municipal Code of Chicago and to prosecute violations of the Municipal Code. So I am part of the consumer fraud team. We are a small but mighty team. We have 4 investigators, an investigation supervisor, and then myself. Our investigators are veteran investigators. I don't think any of them have less than 10 years of experience. So if you're wronged by a business, they are trained to sniff out that violation, to write good enforcement so that we can prosecute it in court. We do have other teams that deal with other types of complaints, including tobacco or liquor complaints. If you have a complaint against a taxi cab, or for cases involving public vehicles, so things like Uber, Lyft, or charter buses, then we have teams that address those as well. But if you are an individual or someone who owns a business and you have a complaint about another business, it will come to me and my consumer fraud team. So let's get into consumer fraud. We're able to prosecute this through what else? Our consumer fraud ordinance, which says that no person shall engage in any act of consumer fraud, deceptive practice, or unfair method of competition while engaged in business in the city of Chicago. And so what that doesn't tell us is what consumer fraud is or what a consumer is. And so we look to this commonly accepted common law definition of what consumer fraud is. And so we typically define that as a misrepresentation that a consumer relies on. That is, the misrepresentation means that it's important, material fact, misrepresentation or omission of a material fact relied on during the course of business. And typically a financial loss is also a component of consumer fraud. Consumer is also not defined in our ordinances. So this means that for most of the ordinances that we prosecute, a consumer can be an individual or it can be a business. There are certain ordinances or statutes that we prosecute that do define a consumer as someone who is contracting for goods or services for the use in their own home. And so for the ordinances that define a consumer that way, businesses will be excluded from protection under those ordinances. But the positive thing is that because we have so many different ordinances available to us for the same kind of industries, then we typically have a way to get at businesses that, or to protect businesses if they're excluded under a certain ordinance for not being a consumer. So to kind of take this out of the theoretical realm of this very, kind of narrow definition of what consumer fraud is, let's talk about real life examples. So one that we've seen is we had an engaged couple file a complaint about a wedding venue. And in the complaint, the couple indicated that they put down a down payment and made subsequent payments to this wedding venue, probably something in the realm of, I think, $20,000 or $30,000, and with the remaining payments to be due the week of the event and then the night of the wedding. And the wedding venue actually shut down before the event occurred, and they refused to give any money back. They had no backup plan. They weren't moving somewhere else, just straight up shut the business down, refused to return anything. So of course they filed a complaint, and BACP initiated an investigation. And what we found during the course of the investigation was first that the venue was a renter. They didn't own the building that they moved away from or were kicked out of. They were a renter, and they had been delinquent in their rent payment for years. And there was this eviction case that had been pending for years prior to the venue signing a contract with our couple. So when we contacted the person that owned the building, we found out about this eviction case, and we found out that after the contract was signed, there had been an agreement that the venue would vacate the premises, pay some amount to the owner of the building, and forego the eviction proceeding, which can be lengthy, but that essentially they would willingly leave. So they signed this agreement, and then what do? A week later, they accept another $10,000 payment from this couple that's supposed to be getting married there. Now, obviously, this venue knew that there was an end date, there was a move out date for them, and that the wedding was to take place after that. So they're sitting here accepting money, and the misrepresentation, of course, is that that they're financially solvent and will be able to actually host the wedding. This is something that's material. Obviously, the couple wouldn't agree to do business with the venue knowing, that they were not actually going to be able to provide the space. And so this is kind of a classic example of consumer fraud. So let's talk about what isn't consumer fraud, what we can't prosecute under our consumer fraud ordinance. If you're simply unhappy with quality of work, that's not going to rise to the level of consumer fraud. A misunderstanding between you and a business is also not consumer fraud. We see this a lot where a contract is kind of vague and doesn't really lay out the terms. So if you're having countertops put in and you think that you're getting quartz countertops, and the business thinks that they're supposed to be delivering butcher block and the contract doesn't lay it out, then that kind of misunderstanding doesn't rise to the level of consumer fraud. And finally, a breach of contract isn't going to be consumer fraud. So for example, if you contract with a business, they're supposed to deliver something to you, and the contract does not indicate that time is of the essence, then something like a 30-minute delay in the delivery of goods isn't going to rise to the level of consumer fraud. So does this mean that you should only file a complaint with us if what happened to you falls within this kind of narrow definition of what consumer fraud is? And the answer is no, because our team doesn't just prosecute consumer fraud. We regulate a number of different types of businesses in a number of different kinds of ways. So I'm not going to list these off, but you can see the list of all of the different types of specific businesses that are specifically regulated. This means that these industries, the city sought to protect people from, to draft ordinances that say how they have to be licensed and how they can operate and what they're prohibited from doing. So if you have a complaint against a business on this list, you're welcome to file a complaint with us. But these aren't the only types of businesses that we regulate. Every business that operates in the city of Chicago generally has to have a business license. We also are able to accept complaints for those types of businesses that don't have these specific licenses. So things like, appliance repair, or selling appliances or electronics, things like that, those kinds of general services that you might deal with, there may not be specific regulations for them, but we are still able to prosecute those. We're not limited to just this type. Now, as for consumer fraud, I wanted to talk about why it matters if something falls into the realm of consumer fraud or not. And the biggest reason why this matters is because it speaks to the city's ability to be able to seek restitution on behalf of a consumer. Restitution is a refund that the business would pay to you. Restitution is sought, it's written the same way as our enforcement. So essentially we write a ticket for violations of the code, and then we would write a ticket for restitution to the complainant. And our ordinance, our consumer fraud ordinance, specifies that if the city is going to seek restitution on behalf of someone, there has to be a violation of consumer fraud. But the kind of neat thing about the consumer fraud ordinance is that it incorporates a bunch of different state laws and makes violations of those state laws a violation of the consumer fraud ordinance. So again, you see a long list here on your screen, not going to read them off, but essentially, if there is a violation of any one of these, then it's going to constitute a violation of our consumer fraud ordinance, opening up our ability to possibly recoup funds on your behalf. So I did want to talk about the ones that I highlighted here. We see the Home Repair and Remodeling Act. In the beginning, I mentioned that there are going to be some laws that exclude a business from qualifying for protection under those laws, and this is unfortunately one of them. The Home Repair and Remodeling Act specifies that home repair is, someone's home where their primary residence is. But the kind of nice thing is that the city also we regulate home repair and general contracting, and that doesn't exclude businesses. It doesn't have a definition that would exclude them from filing a complaint. So it's always nice, for individuals, we have this extra option, but by no means is it, necessary. It's just kind of a bonus. A business that enters into a contract with a contractor to have some work done can still file a complaint if they're wronged by that contractor. The next one that we see is the Safe and Hygienic Bed Act. We get a lot of complaints about seedy furniture stores selling used items, and the Safe and Hygienic Bed Act requires disclosures to be made about the quality and the condition of the furniture that they're selling. And so if they don't have those disclosures, then that's going to constitute a violation of consumer fraud, where we might be able to seek restitution. And then finally, we have sections of the Illinois Vehicle Code. Only certain sections are incorporated into the city's consumer fraud ordinance, but the major ones that we're going to be talking about today involved when you purchase a used vehicle or when you need a tow. And so when there are what we would consider kind of technical violations, they didn't include something on their paperwork, because of the way that our consumer fraud ordinance is written, these sections of the Illinois Vehicle Code are adopted into the consumer fraud ordinance, again, opening up our ability to collect restitution on a complainant's behalf. So there are limitations to what we're able to do, and I want to be clear about those things. So BACP doesn't represent individuals. When we file a case, it's the city of Chicago versus that defendant business. As a complainant, you're not a party. You don't direct litigation the way that you would if you filed a private lawsuit. And my duty as a prosecutor is to my client, which is the city of Chicago. And so everything that I do is going to be in the best interest of my client. We're also not able to provide mediation services. Unfortunately, we're not able to have you come in with the business and we sit down at City Hall and try to work it out. We're just not able to go between private parties in that way. The next thing that I'm not able to do is to accept any kind of payment on behalf of a complainant from a business. So let's say that we sought restitution in a case, and for whatever reason, the business doesn't want it to be part of the city judgment and they want to give you your money back directly, which is a good thing for you, right? Because that guarantees that you're getting that money back directly. They're not putting it on some kind of payment plan. But I can't accept a check from business and then give it to you. At no point can I take possession of anything from a business to give to a complainant. And then finally, our investigators are not expert witnesses. They're well-qualified investigators, but they're not technical experts. We investigate numerous different kinds of complaints. They can't be experts in everything. So they're not mechanics, they're not contractors. We're not able to get under the hood of your car and take a look and see, oh yeah, that body shop really messed your stuff up. This is what it's going to cost to fix it. Here's what the damage is. Here's what we're going to ask for in restitution. Similarly, we're not able to come to your house to look at and inspect the work that was done and how it may be deficient and what it would cost to fix it. And so restitution is really limited then to either cases where either someone did no work at all, and so you would obviously be entitled to all of your money back, If there was a contract that listed what work would be done or what would be provided for certain amounts of money, and we can clearly see what was done, what wasn't, and kind of use the contract and be able to say you're owed a partial refund because they did, this part, but we can see that they didn't do this part. So you're entitled to that some reduced amount back. Alternatively, if you have another expert come in, so you take your car to another body shop, or you have another contractor come in and assess what it would cost to repair defective work, then that is something that we would be able to use to ask for restitution. It's just not something that our investigators are able to do themselves because they're not experts qualified in that way. So we have a list of our most frequent complaint types. We're going to go into each one of these. Just wanted to kind of lay them out in the beginning. But first, we're going to talk about some general tips to avoid bad businesses. The best way to not get burned is to just do your homework before signing a contract with someone. Ask your friends and family who they'd recommend. Check out Yelp or Google. Make sure that they actually have reviews. If you're searching a business and there's nothing there, that's going to be a red flag. Either the business is just a bad actor that's popping up under this new name, and that's why you can't find anything for them, or they're not established. When there's so many different good businesses, it's really not worth the risk to go with someone that you can't find any information about. Of course, I couldn't miss an opportunity to plug BACP because we have some pretty cool things on our website that's meant to help people choose who to do business with. So we have a list of businesses that have been found liable for consumer fraud in the last 3 years. We have a list of licensed businesses. And we have a list of general contractors. So what you'd want to do, start looking for the businesses in your area. Once you have someone that seems to have good reviews, check it against our list of licensed businesses. Make sure that they have their license, that they can operate in the city of Chicago, and then open up that list for businesses that were found liable of consumer fraud and check them there. And that will really help you to weed out people that aren't licensed. It's kind of a basic thing, but a lot of the complaints that we receive involve businesses that don't have a business license. And then finally, if someone is holding themselves out as a corporation, they have Inc. or LLC at the end of their business name, search the Secretary of State website to make sure that they are not only registered, but active. Again, this is kind of a basic thing. If you look up a corporation and there's no entry for them, then you could really get burned. Similarly, if they're not active, they've let their LLC or corporation go inactive, then this can hurt because if you do business with them, they harm you. We file a case against them, we seek restitution, we even get a judgment against them, but the entity doesn't exist. They don't have any assets for us to go after. So it can be really helpful to look at the Secretary of State website to see whether the corporation is in good standing. So moving on, you're going to want to get absolutely everything in writing. A lot of the complaints we receive could be prevented if there was just more information in the contract about what the parties were contracting about. You want to make sure that it specifies the kinds of, the quality of the kind of merchandise that you are going to be getting for what you're paying. If during the course of, executing the contract, there are changes that you both agree and want to make, then make sure that you sign a subsequent agreement that documents what that change is if you're providing additional If you're providing additional money, then what is that going to? The next one is to get a second opinion. It kind of goes back to, us being lay people. We're not mechanics, we're not contractors. I bring my car into the shop. Maybe I know enough to walk away when someone says that I need to pay them to put more blinker fluid in. But anything beyond that, I'm going to have a hard time because I'm not a mechanic. So what I would do then is to take my car somewhere else, ask them for the diagnosis, see what the cost is to repair, and just, compare what the cost is going to be, whether it's kind of in the same ballpark, whether they come up with the same diagnosis. And that way you can see whether the two shops that you're looking at are in agreement with each other, and make a decision, based on which one works better for you. Another big one is going to be to avoid paying cash. If a business is not able to accept a check, that might be a red flag. Cash transactions are not traceable. If you submit a complaint and all you have is that you took out a big chunk of money on some date, it's not the best evidence to be able to put on that case. So ask for a receipt, pay with a credit card if possible. Chargebacks have been really helpful for some of our complainants to be able to recoup their money in a pretty quick way. So keep that in mind. And then the next thing is going to be to make sure that you keep all of your paperwork, even if it seems like things are going fine, contract is executed, you paid in full. If you have problems, a couple weeks, couple months down the line, you're going to want to have access to receipts, invoices, contracts, all of that paperwork that you had in order to have the best evidence for your case. Okay, moving on to our first, specific business that we wanted to talk about. Far and away, this is the number one thing that we receive complaints about. As a prosecutor, part of my job is to attend conferences where we meet with prosecutors from other cities who do this. And I think I can pretty much say that across the entire country, the number one thing that consumer fraud departments are receiving complaints about are home repair. So the biggest one is if someone is trying to make unsolicited contact to you, that's going to be a really big red flag, especially if it's after a fire or storm. There are, fraudulent contracting companies whose sole business is to try to get the insurance proceeds from people. They know that there's going to be access to funds, access to large amounts of money. And so, it isn't just limited to that kind of fire or storm scenario. Anytime someone is making unsolicited contact, that should kind of put you on notice, because what this will typically look like, someone will come up to your door and say, "Oh, excuse me, I noticed that your front porch could use a little TLC. We were doing a project in your neighborhood and we have these leftover materials. We don't want to lug them back. We're not going to be able to use them in the future. So let's cut a deal. We'll give you a big discount so that we can get rid of these materials. And, we're both better off." And before this webinar, maybe you'd say, "Well, that sounds reasonable enough, right?" But now you'll say, "Take a hike," because what they're going to do is they are going to tell you, "Oh, we're missing, some piece that we need to be able to do this project. When's a good time for us to come back? We'll take your payment, and then, we have to secure our time in some way. So we'll take your payment, we'll come back. What's a good time for you?" And then you'll never see them again. Or if they don't do that, maybe they'll undertake doing some small portion of the project. They'll demo the porch and then do this, really minimal amount of work, and then they'll take off and you'll never see them again. And that one actually leaves you in a worse position, right? Because then you're left with this, gaping hole where your porch should be, and it's something that you have to take care of immediately. These can be really difficult to trace. A lot of times, people don't get license plates. These people aren't giving their real names. They're paying in cash. Sometimes they ask for gift cards. Huge, huge red flag. Cannot stress that enough. Please do not do business with somebody that is making unsolicited contact and knocking on your door. You should always ask to see license and insurance if they can't show those things, or if they don't match up with what is on your contract. That's a red flag. One common scheme that we see is we'll have someone that doesn't have their own license pulling permits under the pulling permits under another business, and that's fraudulent on both ends. If someone is starting to do a project, they have to use their own GC license to pull any required permits. If they're requesting the full payment in advance, depending on what the contract is, that can be a big red flag. If the price is way below other estimates that you've seen, another big red flag. And then finally, I do want to talk about a couple consumer rights documents that are required, not just in the city of Chicago, but for the entire state of Illinois. And that's the consumer rights brochure and the 3-day right of rescission. Almost no one that files a complaint with our department for home repair was given these documents. So the consumer rights brochure just basically lays out what to look for when starting a home repair project. It's something that the contractor has to have you sign. You get to keep a copy of it. They make a copy of it with your signature on it, and they have to keep it. The other one is the 3-day right of rescission. If you sign a contract in your home, even if you called that company to come out and write up a contract or give you an estimate, if you're going to start doing work with them, they have to give you the 3-day right of rescission, which says that you have the right to cancel a contract that you signed in your home. So if they don't give you that 3-day right of rescission and you signed the contract at your house, big red flag. So what happens if you kind of ignore these red flags and do business with someone who is a fraudster? The work that they do isn't going to be quality work. They might take off and just never return, period. And they tend not to pull permits. And that puts you at huge risk because the building department is tasked with making sure that work done in the city of Chicago is safe for everyone. And typically inspections are part of a lot of different kinds of projects. So electrical, plumbing, things like that. And so if you don't get a permit, or if your contractor doesn't pull a permit and they don't schedule these inspections, and then they do drywall over all of that work that you just had done, Buildings is going to make you tear it out so that they can inspect that what's behind the walls is actually safe. And guess who gets to pay if that work wasn't done properly? And guess who gets to pay for all of that drywall and painting to be redone? It's you. And there's also potential liability in the form of fines for homeowners. If their general contractors don't pull permits, they'll file a case against you, the homeowner, and make you fix it and potentially fine you. So you want to make sure that you ask any contractor, are permits required? What's the process? Do we need inspections? And ask them to keep you up to date on that area. So I mentioned before that we have this awesome team of investigators, and they have just a slightly different perspective than I do. As a prosecutor, I get the cases that have been filed. We know that there's violations. We know that we have jurisdiction, but the investigators work on complaints that they have to close out because we don't have enough information or we don't have the right kind of evidence. And so I ask them, what do you think is important for consumers to know just in general? And here's what they came up with. They end up closing out a ton of complaints against big box construction stores. And I think we all know who we're talking about here, the big orange one and the big blue one and the green one that has a jingle known across the entire Midwest, right? So those companies, as well as online-based companies that claim to have lists of verified contractors. They'll say, these are our licensed contractors. Choose someone from one of our lists. And what you don't tend to see in the fine print until it's way too late is that these stores and those websites don't actually stand by those contractors. If something goes terribly wrong, there's no actual affiliation with the stores or those websites. They're not going to do anything to help you. And we end up closing a ton of complaints against those kinds of stores because people are under the belief that there's some assurance from those companies that they're going to only recommend a contractor that's well qualified, that's going to do good work, or that is licensed. A lot of times we find out that these companies that are saying all of our vendors listed on here are licensed, and they're not. So all of this to say, there's no substitute for vetting companies yourself. So moving on to what's probably the next most common type of complaint is motor vehicle repair shops. This one is difficult for BACP because, as I said, our investigators are not mechanics. So they're not able to take a look at your car and say, yeah, this shop messed your car up in this way. So what they're really looking for when we receive these kinds of complaints are to make sure that you were given all of the information that you're entitled to, and that you had the right to choose how some of the how some of this project is going to work, essentially. Now, of course, if you give money to a body shop and they just do nothing, or if they do something pretty egregious like parking your car on the public way and then you get towed or parking tickets, obviously we're going to be able to seek restitution. That's completely egregious behavior. But otherwise, what we're reviewing for is, what you see on your screen here. Your estimate should have your name, contact info about your vehicle, odometer, in and out mileage. One thing to note also is that when a motor vehicle repair shop prepares a written estimate after looking at your vehicle and diagnoses it, they have the right to charge for that estimate. So that isn't going to be a red flag. There's nothing in the ordinance that says that they have to provide that information for free. So again, not a red flag if they're asking some amount of money to prepare a written estimate for you. And so the big consumer rights things that are built into the city's ordinance that a repair shop has to give you the right to decide is whether or not you want to inspect the parts that are being replaced. You can say, no, I don't care about seeing what you're replacing, but sometimes people are a little bit skeptical. They're going in to have something replaced. They think that the business might just take the money, not replace the part, and the problem continues. So you do have the right to say, yes, please, I want to see what you removed from my car. The next one is you have the right to know whether they're providing a warranty or not, whether the warranty is to parts or whether it's to labor. Again, they're not required to provide a warranty to you, but you have the right to know upfront what they're going to warrant. And then the final one, and maybe the most important one, is that you have the right to decide what's going to happen if the work is going to exceed the price that you were quoted by a certain amount, $15 or 10%. So if that happens, you can choose what you want the repair shop to do. So you can either say, no, I don't approve anything over $15 or 10%. I want you to prepare another estimate, tell me what's wrong with it, and tell me what it's going to cost me. You also have the right to write in your own number of how much you would be okay with the body shop charging if the quote is higher than the estimate. And then it also indicates that if it's going to go above that amount, then they need to call you. Or you have the right to say, body shop, I trust your repair shop, I trust you. I've been doing business with you for a while. You don't need to call me. If you say that it's going to cost $500 over what you originally quoted me, that's okay. I believe you. So these are all of the things that you should look for on the estimate. If the repair shop doesn't have these options, then it's a red flag. These are things that are all required under the city's ordinance for all motor vehicle repair shops that operate in the city of Chicago. Okay, moving on to rogue towing. So rogue towing is one that we've seen a lot frequently. When you get into an accident and a tow truck shows up, you may be kind of shaken up and not realize that it's not by accident. They are there because they listen to police scanners and they're waiting. Sometimes you can see them in the off ramps prepared to hop on the expressway to drive recklessly to get to an accident. And then when they get there, they'll say, the police called us, or, the city called us, or your insurance called us, or AAA called us. Or sometimes they'll say, our lot is just right down the street and I happened to pass by you. They're using police scanners. And you need to take a step back. When they're arriving on the scene before you call anyone, there's no possible way that they could have known other than to use a police scanner to find the accident. That's unlawful in the city of Chicago for multiple reasons. You can't use a police scanner to search for potential customers, and you can't solicit business on the public way at all. And so right off the bat, we're in violation of two city codes here. So what they want you to do is to trust them when they say that they have some affiliation with someone that you're connected to. Because then what they're going to do is they'll have you sign a tow disclosure. And the disclosure typically does have their business name, their address, their licensing numbers. But what they don't do is they don't fill in every single blank in the costs box. And so they'll fill in parts of it and you sign it because you just got into this accident that's bad enough that you need a tow. You don't take the time to total it up, and they don't either. And we've seen tow disclosures where someone signed off agreeing to a tow that cost $8,000. That is horrifically unreasonable. I don't think I need to say that. Typically, depending on how far you're going, it shouldn't be more than a couple $100s. But if they don't total that amount, then you may not see how everything is adding up to these absolutely egregious amounts of money. And the difficult thing is that BACP's consumer fraud ordinance specifies that we can seek fines and we can seek restitution, but we don't have the ability to try to get your car back without paying that egregious sum of money. Really, what you're left with is paying that amount and then filing a complaint, hoping that they come into court, that we're able to collect that amount. And so the best way out of that scenario is to really just not get into it in the first place. Don't accept an unsolicited tow. If you're for some reason believing them when they say that they're affiliated with your insurance or something like that, take a minute, call your insurance and ask if they sent someone. If you hadn't reached out to them yet, if they didn't specify that they're sending someone, then just call for your own tow. That's something that's well within your rights. Finally, don't sign a tow authorization that has any blank spaces, especially in that total, where it totals the amount. Now, when we prosecute this, our position is that if the amount isn't totaled, then it's defective, and we use that as a basis to ask for restitution. But again, better to not be in that situation at all. Call for your own tow or call to confirm directly with whoever they said they were sent by. Just confirm that information. So the next one I wanted to talk about is your rights when you're buying a used car. As of, I think it's 2017, the state of Illinois requires an implied warranty when you buy a used car. And so when you go and look at cars, there should be a buyer's guide in the window that indicates that there is this implied warranty on the vehicle. If you go to a lot and there's no buyer's guide in the window, that lot is in violation, not just of in the city, but any dealership in the entire state of Illinois. So big red flag if that's not in the window. And so this implied warranty, I guess it is somewhat limited in that, it's only going to cover powertrain components, and it's only for 15 days or 500 miles. If there is a defect in one of those, then you're responsible for some of the repairs. It's out of pocket would not be more than $100. And if the cost of the repair is going to be more than the total of the vehicle, then the dealership does have the right to just give you your money back and then take possession of the car. So that is something, that the state of Illinois provides. You're entitled to it as long as you're not buying a car that has over 150,000 miles, has a rebuilt title, weighs more than 8,000 pounds, or is an antique. One thing that I do want to clear up is that there is no right of rescission on vehicle sales. We have received complaints where, someone drives off the lot and they go back the next day and say, I changed my mind. I don't want this car. I want my money back. Can't do it. You're really held to that sale. It's essentially signing a contract. So make sure, that you do your test drives and that you're sure that you want to proceed with the purchase of the vehicle, because once it's done, and you can't go back on it. One other thing is to be aware of third-party warranties and know what they're going to cover, and make sure that you don't get duplicate coverage. So a lot of vehicles will offer a manufacturer's warranty for a certain amount of time. So you don't want to have that warranty in effect, and then you get this other third-party warranty that's covering the exact same thing. That's just money right out the window. We did have one consumer that filed a complaint. She bought an absolute piece of junk, but then purchased a third-party warranty, thinking that, she could buy this piece of junk for very, very cheap and then file a claim with her warranty and ask them to fix everything. That's not how it works. They're not going to cover anything that existed at the time that you purchased it. This is going to be kind of specific to the exact agreement you sign. Make sure you read through the fine print on any warranty that you're purchasing, and don't do what that consumer did. Don't buy a piece of junk for very cheap, thinking that someone's going to cover the cost to make it essentially a brand new vehicle. Just not how it works. Okay, so moving on. Again, this is one where we get a lot of complaints. We're not finding a lot of fraud, but I'd like to do a little PSA on it because I think that people kind of don't understand how this works. And it's private booting. So owners of private lots will sign a contract with a company to put boots on vehicles that have to be removed for $170. The private people that own the private lot are assured that only their customers are able to park in the lot, and then the company gets that $170 from the customer to remove it. There has to be signs posted, but if you go park in that lot and that lot has a Dunkin' Donuts in it, and you go and get your Dunkachino, and then you go across the street to some other store that doesn't have its own parking, the second that you step off that lot, they can affix the boot. That's proper. So even if you patronize a business that's in the lot, if you leave, it's a good boot. You're going to have to pay $170 to have it removed. And now we do have this note here that if you come back and it's not fully attached, then you don't have to that you don't have to pay anything. But I can tell you that these people are quick. They can probably fully attach the boot in under a minute. It doesn't matter how long you step off that lot for. You leave on foot, it's a good boot. You're going to have to pay. Another one that we don't get a whole ton of complaints about But it's that time of year, so I did just want to bring it up really quickly. IRS scams. This is going to look like you getting an email or a phone call, or maybe even someone knocking on your door saying that you owe money that you need to pay right now, or maybe even that you're entitled to a refund and they want to give you your money back, but you have to provide some kind of personal information. IRS isn't going to contact you in those ways. They'll send you a letter. They'll give you a chance to appeal whatever they're saying that you owe. If you ever have any questions about it, please call the IRS directly. If you get a call from someone that purports to be from the IRS, hang up and just call them back, because with technology that's available today, they have the ability to kind of hide where they're actually calling from and make it look like they're calling from the IRS. Next one is the sales of commercial goods. We've seen a couple of these kinds of complaints come in kind of rapid succession within the last few months. And what this has looked like is that business owners are finding these kind of generic websites that are offering commercial or industrial merchandise for a really low price. And the websites tend not to have any kind of information regarding contact information, where their brick and mortar store is. Maybe they only have a PO box. These all make it very, very difficult to trace who is actually defrauding you. So it's something that you can absolutely file a complaint about, but it can be so difficult to find out who's actually wronging you, whether they're even based in the city of Chicago. So if we're not able to find that connection to the city of Chicago, then we will refer it to the Federal Trade Commission, ftc.gov. We'll let you know that may be a more appropriate authority to handle your complaint if there is no tie to the city of Chicago. So before I move on to what to do if this happens to you, I do want to talk about what makes us vulnerable to these kinds of scams. So the first one, they're going to present an exciting offer. Maybe it's something, that they're offering merchandise or services that are cheaper than what you've seen in other places, or maybe it's time sensitive. If you're redoing your kitchen, you may have the luxury to be able to shop around. But if you were like a lot of homeowners recently with a huge snowstorm and the destruction that's caused when all of that melts, you don't have a lot of time to shop around when you got a burst pipe or your garage collapsed or your roof is leaking, right? But the time that you're able to spend looking up just to make sure that the business has reviews and the reviews are generally positive, that's going to pay you back tenfold. Another one, we're talking about, these grisly people who just take your money and run. And so you kind of think, that they're going to be like nasty or give some kind of indication that they have bad intentions. But just the opposite is true. The reason why they're successful is because they're able to build some kind of trust in you that they're using to manipulate you. And so often it's not, that someone is, this big fraudster is nasty. It's that, they've assured you that everything's going to be okay, that they're going to be able to finish the work, that everything is going to be good as new. Another one, they present themselves as authority. All goes back to lay people just they're not qualified. We're not mechanics. We're not contractors. We don't always know what the problem is with the things that are going wrong in our homes or our vehicles. And so they kind of leverage however many years of experience that they have to say, you should sign this contract now. If we don't take care of it right now, I can tell you, you're going to have much bigger problems. And then finally, this consumer fraud isn't something that we see in one area of the city or in one age group or one, certain education level. It happens to absolutely everybody. We get a lot of heartbreaking calls where people are embarrassed or ashamed to come forward because how could they fall for something like this? And the answer is because it's not limited to just one certain group of people. Everybody could potentially be a victim. Half of all victims have a college degree. You may think, I'm young, I'm savvy, I think I know what to look for. But actually, ages 20 to 29 have the make up the biggest portion of people that file complaints with the FTC. Unfortunately, BACP, we don't have our own numbers, but we do, both prosecute consumer fraud. So these are probably, they probably somewhat track at least. Or on the other hand, you may say, I'm not naive. I know what to look for, but in fact, those 60 above, even though you make up a smaller portion of complainants, the amount that, excuse me, one moment. Sorry about that. If you're 60 and above, there are less people filing complaints, but the loss is actually greater. So if you do find yourself a victim of fraud or a victim of a bad business, make sure that you get all of your documents together. So your contract, take photos of what happened, that could be helpful. Any correspondence between you and the business, that could be helpful as well. We do encourage people to talk to an attorney. As I mentioned, restitution isn't going to be available for every single type of complaint. And we don't want you to rely on the city to get your money back, and then we're not able to do that. And then you've lost your ability to file your own case. So at the outset, make sure that you talk to an attorney about kind of what your rights are, about the prospect of filing a private lawsuit. If you do file a private lawsuit, that doesn't mean that you cannot file a complaint with the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago, its main function is to prosecute violations of the municipal code. So your rights as an individual to sue someone aren't hindered by the city's ability to file a case for consumer fraud. Now, it should go without saying, if you seek and obtain a refund in your own case, we can't double dip. We can't get that money back for you. And then what we want you to do is to file a complaint with BACP. And I say it with BACP, but we're ultimately where it's going to end up. But all of our complaints need to go through 311. They take all kinds of complaints, not just BACP complaints. And so you have three options for filing a complaint. You can pick up your phone, call 311. You can pick up your phone, download an app, and use the Shy 311 app, or you can do it online at 311.chicago.gov. We've gotten some feedback that the 311 system isn't always the most user-friendly. And so I did want to just quickly walk you through the exact buttons that you're going to click to initiate a consumer fraud complaint. And so when you go to the 311 website, this is the initial splash page. You're going to click Create Service Request, highlighted and we're circled in red there. You'll also see check status. So at the end, you're going to get a service request number, and it'll start SR and then the year 21, so SR 21 dash, and then it'll be 8 numbers. And so you can come back to this screen after you submit your service request to check up on it. It'll also ask you if you want to create a username. And if you do that, then you can add that service request to a list. And then when you log in, you'll just have to click on it and you can see it. But by no means are you required to create a username or a login to be able to use this service. So when you click that button, it'll come up with these three. You'll click Service Request again. And then, like I said, 311 handles all different types of service requests that would be assigned to different departments. And so we'll need you to click the one that says Consumer and Employee Protection. When you click that, it'll pull up this screen with different categories. You'll click Consumers. And then you'll click Consumer Fraud Complaint. You might see there, it says Consumer Retail Store Complaint. go with consumer fraud complaint. This makes sure that we're going to get all the information that we need. Consumer fraud complaint is the most relevant one, so make sure you go with that one. If you do consumer retail, will still come to us, but stick with consumer fraud complaint. Try to keep that in mind. So the next slide is going to ask you for some basic information. The first one is a pull down box, and it'll ask you to specify what exactly happened. So there's options for home repair, there's options for motor vehicle shops. It's a big long list, and there is one for other. So if the business doesn't fall into one of those categories, you would just click that. Date, how much you paid. There is the option to upload documents at this point, which we would encourage you to do. Those contracts, pictures, correspondence, all of those documents, you can do that at this point. At this point, it's going to ask you about you personally. Can you file a complaint anonymously? Yes, you can. If you do that, it kind of hinders our case, where investigators can't talk to you to get follow-up information. We can't ask for restitution because restitution is generally paid through the city of Chicago. And so we would need your name and address to be able to disperse a check to you when it's paid by that business. I think the main reason why people would want to file an anonymous complaint is because they are fearful of some kind of retribution. And I can assure you, in my 4.5 years, we've never seen anything like that. I don't think that any of our investigators who have been here 10, 20 years have ever seen anything like that. And you have to keep in mind that the city's cases are, again, City of Chicago versus bad business. Your name isn't attached to it. We might seek restitution, but the violations are for violations of the city's municipal code. And so you can be assured, that if you file a complaint, it's really unlikely that we're going to see anybody go after you. Let me go back for a minute. When you hit next, it brings us to a summary page, which I very regretfully did not take a screenshot of. The summary page allows you to make some final edits if you need to make any changes or anything like that. It has a button at the bottom that says either finish or submit, and you would click that and it would bring you to this page. Hopefully the lack of a screenshot there doesn't hinder you too much. I really believe in you. I believe that you would be able to find that finish and submit button to bring you to this page that shows you that your complaint was submitted. So you'll see there the SR21- and I blacked it out, but there will be 8 numbers there. You can go back to the 311 website to check up on what the status is using that number. So if you didn't create an account, you would have the opportunity to do it at this point by clicking follow request. Otherwise, just write down that SR21 number so that you can check on it. At the bottom, you'll see that the estimated completion time is 90 days. I know that may seem like quite a while, but remember, we're a small team and we have a lot of complaints to get through. All right, so what happens after you submit this complaint? They'll send it to BACP. Our triage team will make sure that we have the ability to proceed. So BACP can issue enforcement against businesses that are or are required to be licensed by the City of Chicago. There are certain state laws that prevent BACP from enforcing any regulations against them. So one example is doctors or nurses, actually most kinds of medical professionals. BACP is not allowed to regulate in any way. They're regulated by a state entity. Interestingly enough, barbers are on this list. So if you get the worst haircut of your life, unfortunately, BACP will have to direct you to someone else. Also probably wouldn't be considered fraud, but just trying to keep it light here. The next thing that will happen is that the investigator will contact you. They'll contact the business directly as well. This is kind of a fact gathering mission. They're looking not just for information related to the complaint you filed, but they're also looking at, whether they were licensed, whether they had insurance, whether they were operating kind of within all of the technical requirements of the ordinance. So if the investigator finds violations, they'll issue citations. The citations are things that could result in fines, and they may be able to issue restitution if we have restitution where it's clear what the consumer is entitled to. And I want to be clear that I've been using consumer throughout this entire thing, but this applies to businesses as well. All of these things that I'm talking about, this applies to people that are running businesses, with the exception of the Home Repair and Remodeling Act, which defines consumer in a more limited way. So can we get restitution for a business? Yes, yes, we can. The next thing that happens is I review all of the citations that they issued to make sure that they're written properly, that we have all of the evidence that we need to prosecute it, and that they're just good, solid, strong cases. So they're filed at the Department of Administrative Hearings. Once they're there, there's a couple different outcomes that can happen. A default judgment is entered when they don't show up at all, when a business doesn't show up at all. We ask for the maximum amount of fines and for restitution. The next way that a case can conclude is through a contested hearing, AKA a trial. So we would have you come in, we would need you to testify. Right now it's over the phone or through WebEx like this. We wouldn't have you come in personally, but essentially the judge would decide yes or no whether the violations occurred. And then the last one is through a settlement. We try to resolve all of our cases through settlements before they get to that contested hearing point. Just one note, if we ask for restitution, we're never going to decrease the amount of restitution that we're asking for in a settlement unless we somehow find out that the amount of restitution that we asked for was too high or was inaccurate in some way. So if we ask for $1,000 in restitution and I don't know, $2,000 in fines, we're not going to accept a settlement that is for less than that restitution amount. Could go down on the fines, restitution, as long as it has a logical basis. That's not something that we're going to negotiate about. Finally, after we enter a judgment through either a contested hearing, settlement, or default, these cases are turned over to the Department of Finance. So BACP isn't actually involved in any collections process, but I can assure you that we never give up on trying to collect our judgments. And then just to be clear about how restitution works, again, it's part of the city's case. So the city will attempt to collect the fines and the restitution amount. Once the restitution is paid in full, then the city of Chicago would disperse a check to you. Keep in mind that sometimes people are eligible for payment plans. So if you're entitled to restitution, someone else, the respondent may be able to get on a payment plan that would stretch out the length of time that it would take to actually recoup that money. Just to give you an idea of the number of cases that we're kind of dealing with, and also keep in mind that this was a year where, we worked from home 9 months, courts were closed 6 months of the year. We entered 387 judgments. That means that's the number of cases closed, not the number of cases that were pending or were filed. 387 cases that came to a conclusion for over $6.3 million in fines and over $150,000 in restitution to complainants. This is not bad, if I say so myself, but I think we can do better. And we are a complaint-based department. We don't know about the things that are happening to you unless you file a complaint. So I don't want you to worry, is my complaint, one that we'll be able to get restitution about? Is it one that the city is prohibited from taking enforcement action on? If that's the case, we'll let you know. Let us review. We may be able to attack it in some way. Call 311, file your complaint. And if we're not the agency that is able to deal with it, we'll tell you who is, and we'll make sure that you're able to get some help. All right, and that concludes my presentation here. I am happy to answer any questions. Let me take a look at this chat box.
Hey, Marianne, it's Elisa back again. Thank you so much for going over how the city handles complaints, what we're in charge of, and what people can do. So thank you so much for the overview. Let's see what the first question is. And if any attendees have questions, feel free to send them in the chat box to all panelists. First question is how to complain about taxi companies having uninsured cabs operating on the streets of Chicago.
So that any kind of complaint that you want to file with the city of Chicago is going to go through that 311 system. That's not just for consumer fraud, and it's not even just for BACP complaints. You've got a giant pothole, 311, a tree that fell on your house from the public way, 311. It's not just BACP. Call 311, visit the website, use the app. And then I did want to be clear. You see the BACP outreach email there. I'm happy to answer questions about consumer fraud that you can send to that email address. But to be clear, that email address can't accept complaints. It has to go through the 311 system.
Absolutely, good point. A question came in of if the quote is higher than the estimate and you ask for a second estimate, can they charge for a second estimate?
Yes, they can. Typically we don't see egregious fines in this area, maybe 15 to 20, and a lot of shops will kind of apply that if you choose to have the work done. They'll typically apply that back to the fee.
Next question is, where can we find the laws and regulated businesses? So you mentioned the municipal code. Is there any other place for people to go to for resources?
So I'd recommend checking out the BACP website. If you have questions about the kind of license that you should be applying for, then I'd encourage you to make an appointment with the Small Business Center to discuss that. The municipal code, specifically Title IV, talks about what businesses have specific regulations and which ones don't. For purposes of filing a complaint, that's not something that a consumer needs to worry about. Again, file your complaint. We'll make that assessment. We'll draft our citations in accordance with what we're allowed to do.
Good. Question is, do you recommend that homeowners check with the Better Business Bureau as part of the vetting of home repair contractors?
Absolutely. We partnered with the Better Business Bureau before in the past. They have a lot of good information about certain businesses. Keep in mind, though, that they're not a government organization, and make sure that you're not relying solely on one website or one agency to kind of do that research for you. Make sure that you're looking at in addition to Better Business Bureau, look at Google reviews, check out our website as well.
Can we call 311 for our USPS packages disappearing?
So that's going to be so kind of, I guess, a clarifying question is if it's a USPS causing delays, that's not something that we have jurisdiction over. USPS is this federal entity. If you think packages are going missing from your doorstep, that's going to be criminal. BACP's cases are civil cases. Essentially, it's the city of Chicago suing a bad business. We don't have the ability to go after individuals for criminal actions. That's something that you would have to talk to the police department about.
So you mentioned the small but mighty team. What do you think is the average time for a complaint to be resolved? And I know this varies upon like the complaint types, but if you could just talk about that process.
Sure. So you saw the 90 days for a case to be investigated. And then after, if we end up issuing citations, we're required to comply with notice requirements. So we have to give the business it's 30 days notice that they have a court date. And so just to be really safe and ensure that businesses have appropriate notice, it's typically set about 7 weeks away from when the citation is issued. So a citation that's issued today would probably be heard around May 5th. If we don't give proper notice, that kills our case. So we have to make sure that we're abiding by those notice requirements and that they have time to consult with an attorney if they choose to.
Great. Question is, do you have a list of vetted vendors?
No, we don't have, we don't have a city approved list. I think the best thing to do is to refer to the businesses that were cited for consumer fraud, and then to compare that against licensed businesses. Ultimately, we can't control what independent businesses do. So if we put them on the list and then they take advantage of somebody, it would be a really terrible position to be in. So we can tell you who we wouldn't recommend, and you can find that on the list of businesses that were found liable on our website.
I don't see currently any questions coming in. I'll give attendees a couple more minutes. In the meantime, I do want to mention that this webinar was part of the Federal Trade Commission's National Consumer Protection Week. You could find more information about consumer protection on their website, which I'll post in the chat. But I do want to thank Marianne again for sharing your expertise with our attendees.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And I currently do not see any additional questions. I do want to mention also that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Chicago BACP. I just posted that link in the chat box as well. If you have any additional questions, general questions that come up, like Marianne mentioned, feel free to send us an email at bacpoutreach@cityofchicago. And first stop for complaints is the 311 system. And with that, Marianne, do you have any final words for our attendees?
No, I hope you learned something today. I hope you found this helpful. I had a good time. Hope you did too.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us this Friday morning. We wish you a good day and have a good weekend. Thank you again.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.